Welcome to the High Voltage Light Electric Vehicle channel. This video is going to be a look at the operation of the new DMO1 and DMO2 from TOSEVEN motor. I will show you the menu system and some of the functions, and I have to say I'm quite impressed because with what is a very basic menu system, they've managed to pack in more functionality that's easily accessible to the rider than any other system that I can think of. And what's more, this functionality is entirely through the 4-button keypad, and you don't need to use Bluetooth phone apps or programming cables. It's not a particularly new technique, it's pretty old. My original BBS HD display worked in a very similar way. The difference with these motors though is the sheer amount of options and settings you can access and change just with the display and the keypad, and I'll go over some of these options in the video here. So this motor here is the smaller DMO2, which is rated at 500 watts, and the motor powers on with a long press of the power button here, and you get a nice bright screen. It's not too big, it's not too small either. There is actually a light sensor at the bottom here, and it will auto dim depending on lighting conditions. It's not showing particularly well though in this video, I don't think. If you hold down the top button here, you can get the keypad to illuminate, and you also get an icon up here as well. As far as I can tell, this doesn't allow for the lights to be powered on your bike via a 12-volt feed or a relay or anything like that. At least I haven't seen any options yet for that. This DM02 motor came without a throttle, and there is no place on the harness for me to put one in. So I'm going to use it like this to start with. You can get a throttle to work with this for sure, but this was how it was sent, so that's how I'm going to use it initially. This motor as well is a bit limited by the speed sensor not being set up properly, but we can have a quick listen to it though. So before that though, quick thanks to David at EcoCycle for supplying the 52-volt battery here. This has a 25 amp hour capacity and is strong enough to run both this motor here and the larger Big Brother for long distances. As soon as he has his website set up, I'm going to link to the battery in the description. So if I hold this button at the bottom here, it's going to trigger the walk mode. I can also use the crank arm here to trigger the torque sensor, which gets you some quite interesting results because it's not meant to be triggered in this way. Okay. So that's with the torque sensor. I'm hoping that it's going to be nice and sensitive based on what I'm seeing here just with the crank arm. In terms of noise, it's a little bit hard to tell because this is a wooden table, but I have a feeling it's going to be a little bit more noisy than both the Bafang BBS02 and the CYC Photon. So we can have a look now at some of the menu systems that you get, and when you boot it up you can see it's done in power level 1, and you can actually have up to 8 power levels accessible. Power level 0 here is kind of a safety, and that means there's no power either with a throttle or with the pedal assist, and you can change these just by going up and down with the keypad. You also have another option with this eye here, and if you see that it cycles at the moment, it's on city, just at the top here, and it cycles between sport, eco, city, and these are actually 3 separate profiles that you can have, each with up to 8 different power levels, which is actually more flexible in a way than both the Bafang and the CYC systems, which generally just have road and off-road. And not only that, you can set all of those different power levels just using this keypad. If you press this power button here, you can actually cycle through some different screens and change some of the data that is showing here at the bottom. So the default at the start there is the trip, and then you also get a timer, you get an odometer, power in watts. It actually displays power in watts above there, and then I think this is the amount of the torque sensor that is being driven at any one time. There's also the max speed, there's the average speed, and there's battery percentage. This next one is pretty interesting. It has test, and if you click on this here, it gives you another menu system that you can cycle through, and it lets you view a range of test data about battery voltage and motor speed, total battery consumption. You can confirm that your various sensors are working. Like, I don't have a throttle, so it's not showing anything, but there is obviously the torque sensors functioning because that's showing right down there. The next page has your sensors, like your brake, your speed sensor, your shift sensor. I think I can actually get the speed. So I've triggered the speed sensor now manually using this magnet, and you can see that's now changed the speed sensor to be on. Beyond that, you've got some temperatures, and I'm not quite sure here because the ambient one is kind of interesting because it doesn't match up with the room temperature. The controller temperature looks accurate and the motor temperature is absent, so this might be an issue with the display that needs fixing. Maybe the 39 should be the motor temperature, although I haven't exactly run it very much either, so I'm going to find out about that. The next page, you can actually see the light meter there, which is controlling the brightness of the display. And on the next one, you have a few basic options with the colors, so you can change a few basic parts there. And then on this page, you can actually change the font color between white and blue. So just very basic stuff to do things with there. So there we are, back to the main screen. So there are considerably more options with this than pretty much any other display controller combo that I can think of. Some of the screens I think are going to be quite useful on here for troubleshooting problems. It's a very simple, no frills layout, but at the same time, it also gives you a level of control that in many ways is way ahead of Bafang and arguably ahead in some aspects of CYC as well. There are lots more things to see that this display can do. To show those though, I'm going to hook up the larger DM01 motor. So this here is the DM01 rated at 1000 watts. It uses the exact same display and harness as the O2. This one does, however, come with a throttle as standard, so we can have a listen to how this one here sounds. So it is on a wooden surface, but even so, I have a feeling it's going to be a bit louder than the BBS HD. Right now, I don't know if you noticed, but it was flashing an error code for the speed sensor. So I suspect it's speed limited, and without that fully configured, we're not really going to know how it sounds at full output, probably until it's on a bike. I do want to show you though the hidden menus with this display, because there are a ton of options that are hidden away, and they let you configure these motors to a level that normally either requires a phone app or a programming cable. And in the more commercial bikes, it's just simply locked away and not accessible at all. So right now the menus are available with a default passcode. So I'm going to load up that menu and we can take a look. So the first menu here is really not that interesting. You can set things like metric or imperial. You can do like the rim size. You can, I believe, come down to device, and you can set things like enabling, disabling the throttle. You can enable and disable things like the torque sensor. I'm not quite sure why you would want to do that. To get to the really good stuff though, you now have to go to a secondary menu, and you then have to enter the 1234 password again. It feels a little bit clunky. Some of these things from this second menu I think really need to go under the first menu here. So 1 second and I will load up this second one. So in this advanced section, there is quite a lot you can do. and I'm in the process of trying to get the full documentation for everything. I'm not sure if there is an English translation yet. So under this application, one at the top, you can do things like the level count, and this lets you basically set up to your 8 levels all the way down to your 2 levels there. I don't know what this other stuff is, like auto level, no idea. Reverse level, not sure. You can even set like a maximum speed for reverse. And TOSEVEN do make a lot of other motors, so it's possible that this operating system also runs those motors, and that this or these options are for some of that. If I go down to speed and power, you can set each individual speed limit or power level for each of the individual levels that you have. And if you have 6, it will put an extra option there all the way up to 8, and if you only have 2, it will knock them off until you only have 2 there. I kind of like this. It gives you a very granular level of control over the different power levels. The CYC motors have a fancy app that lets you connect with your phone and use sliders to set a maximum of 3 levels of power. But with this very, very simple menu system, you can do it with a few buttons and have up to 8. To change these kind of things on Bafangs, you need a program cable or something like an egg rider. The battery section gives you options to set your different battery types. And right now there isn't a 52 volt option. Apparently there is a workaround to get a 52 volt one on. I'm going to be figuring all that out. You can set things as well, like your low cutoff voltage as well there. So the controller tab, it lets you see how they've created the 3 different modes of eco and city and sport. And right now you can see they're set to a maximum of 30 amps. At least I think that's the maximum for this motor. So if I was to set the eco to 20 amps and the city to 25 amps, that would give me 3 unique modes, each with 2 to 8 levels of power. It's a brutally simple way to execute this, but it works, and it's much easier to configure and manipulate than having 3 separate sets of parameter fields to fill out for each mode. Things like this though, I think they really should be under the first menu. The next tab here, which is the motor, it lets you set a lot of stuff, and I think maybe this motor one does belong where it is, because it has a lot of configuration detail for the motor, including angles, like pole pairs. You can 100% screw up the functioning of the motor here and necessitate a factory reset. You can even run the motor test stuff down here that they do at the factory when they're doing quality control checks. And if we come back again, there's also lots of options for setting PAS, and there's lots of options for setting the torque sensor. And I don't really know a lot about what all these different things do because I don't have a proper manual yet. So I'm not going to do much with these until I know exactly what I'm doing. The temp sensor here lets you set things like what the motor does when it starts to overheat, whether you reduce it back to 30, 50 or 70% power. And some of these don't look like they're set up properly, so I'm going to have to do some learning in this section as well. So that's the menu system. Beyond this display and keypad, there is a programming cable, so I suspect there are quite a few things left that can be tweaked that were maybe still omitted from the menus in here, as extensive as they are. This is not, it's not perfect, and there are a few things that I'd like to see changed, but mostly it's just cosmetic stuff and adding in a few things, like the display could be easily redesigned to look nicer and clearer, and it's functionally fine, but it would be good to see things like maybe the motor temperature listed on here, potentially as a graphic. The menu system itself, I think, just needs adjusting in terms of where items are located. So you could bring most of the stuff to the main menu and then have a few hidden things on a sub menu from that. I think it's pretty refreshing to see this approach to it, because I know you can get an egg rider for your Bafang, but this has as much, or if not more, fine control over the motor that's already built in. You also have to use the egg rider app to make changes with the Bafang, and you can't just use the egg rider display on its own. And CYC also have an app for their motors that does most of the things that you can do here, but it doesn't go down to this level of detail, and you can't get this kind of control directly via the display unit or their app. I think it's a solid interface, but it could be made even better with not that much investment of time and resources. So that's it for this video. If you have any questions and comments, please put them in the description or jump onto our Discord platform and chat about it there. I'll be seeing how easy it is to remove the photon and swapping in the DMO2 motor to start with, because that seemed to be the general consensus, was to put them on the bike that had the photon and then compare it directly to that bike, because I have so much footage from that one already. Huge thanks to everybody for watching. Extra special thanks to the people that have joined the channel and actively contribute to the running of things. It's really appreciated. And I'll see you in the next video. Cheers.